Transformative Principal, episode 87 with Geri Parscale. We had Geri, as she introduced herself to us and only said her last name once. She came and spoke to our district about PLCs. She works for Solution Tree and provides strategies and tips for schools to really increase their ability to do a PLC well, and also to really focus the culture on providing what's best for the students. So I had a great time listening to her. She was a great presenter, and I think that PLCs are an amazing way to do things. And she talked a lot during her presentation about how PLCs are what we do. It's a way of life. It's not a program or something. It's just what we do. And I love that thought about the things we do in education. We don't adopt programs, we just do what it is that we need to do. And she really demonstrated that, and I was really glad to be there. So I hope you enjoy this interview with her. She definitely inspired me and inspired my teachers, and I learned a ton. Could you just kind of go over an overview of what you're focusing on with our teachers specifically today?
You bet. Today and then the past 2 days, I've worked with all of the teachers in Kodiak, and we have spoken about professional learning communities. And professional learning communities focus in on three big ideas. We focus in on learning through a collaborative culture and being able to be governed by results. And then within that, those three big ideas, we focus in on four critical questions, which help us walk the walk, so to speak, and be able to focus in on what we want kids to learn and know and do. We focus in on whether they got it or not through data. And then really questions 3 and 4 help us focus in on what are we going to do for the child who may not know it after we've taught it, and how do we need to intervene, or what do we do for the child and how do we extend their learning if in fact they already knew it before we even taught it, which does happen.
So you mentioned, as you were discussing, we're talking about all those things, but we really spent a lot of time talking about culture. And why is it that culture is so important to focusing on student learning?
To be able to focus in on student learning, the culture of the building has to be that all of us believe, not only believe that all students can learn, but really that we are willing to do something about it, that we are doing whatever it takes. And you'll know, just like we talked about earlier today, you'll know what the culture of the building is when you walk in, because it is what is valued, it is what is repeated, because what is recognized gets repeated. Of course, we know that. And so the culture of the building, how we treat our adults, how we treat our kids, what it is that we expect. In a professional learning community, we know that there are things that are loose and that there are tight things as well. And the things that we value, the things that we are going to say are non-negotiable, those are our tights. And we believe in a PLC that the tight is learning. You will not leave this unit, this course of study, this year without knowing the essential outcomes that we've deemed necessary, so that when students go on, they go on prepared for the next level. And that's really culture. That is understanding that I play an integral role in that. One of the activities that we're going to do this afternoon has to do with remembering letters, actually in a configuration. But when one of us doesn't do our best to be able to meet the goal, then of course the goal is not met. And our goal is for learning at all students, learning at high levels. And so when that's the culture of your building, everyone's working in the right direction.
That's great. And what I've seen is that when schools have a good culture, then all these other things just kind of fall into place, and you don't have to worry as much about the little things that sometimes trip us up as educators, because we're focused on being professional and working well together. What advice do you have for a school who has a negative culture and how to turn that around? one of the people that I was speaking with this morning said that before she took a job at the school, she was telling people that the school people were saying negative things about the school. How do you suggest that you change those things in the community?
I think one of the first things that you do is to be able to identify why you're here. What is your mission? What are your values? What is it that we are in school for? We are not obviously in school for um, a job. It is, but I think that what we as adults have to deem necessary is why we're here. And I think that that then can um, help pave the way, so to speak, to get to a different level. Again, it kind of goes back to what it is you value. What is your um, culture? I used an example this morning, as you'll remember, is what are the stories that we tell? The stories we tell will define our culture, and we want to make sure that those stories honestly are about student learning and student learning at high levels. And if we are not um, able to do that with our culture the way it is, then we need to take a look at our culture and to understand why is it that we are here. In his book Good to Great, I know that he talks about the fact that good companies all take a look at where they're at before they move forward. And I think that that's what Jim Collins meant, was that you're able to take a look at your culture to say, how do we want it to be? What is it that, what's our purpose, and how do we get better? I gave an example this morning of cell phones. We all have cell phones, and if the number of people out there who work on cell phones had not taken a look at where they were before they moved forward, we'd be all using the bricks that we used to carry around. And I think teachers need to do that as well. I think that of all of the professions that are out there, we are the ones, I think, where it's most critical that we can reflect, because when we can reflect on our practice, reflect on how we did with kids, we can then get better at it.
Yeah, absolutely. That reflection is so powerful. And you suggested that we look at why it is that we're not where we want to be. What are some suggestions you have for having those conversations with people who are pretty satisfied with the status quo because it's been good to them? How would you approach that conversation with someone who's happy with where we're at?
You know, Gardner, who of course did his work with multiple intelligences, also wrote a book called Changing Minds. And he talks about there are various things that we can do when we work to change someone's mind. And I think that it's human nature and it's natural to start out with reason and research, because that's something that I think we're used to using, especially in education. But we can go through several steps that he mentions in the book, including but not limited to being able to talk with the individual and say, what about the cultural change, for example, what you're talking about? What about this do you have such an issue with? And maybe if we can reword it or tweak it, then they can come on board. Another piece that he talks about is being able to have real world examples. In other words, if you have someone who is doing the work and someone else or another group who is not, get the group who is struggling to go watch the other group. Teachers a lot of times will say, but I don't want to be looked at as the expert. And what Gardner is saying is that we need to highlight those people who are doing the work with those real world examples, so they can be able to be really put in a highlight, to be able to say, a spotlight, to be able to say, you're doing it, this is how we want it done, and focus in on that. So there's a variety of steps to go through before we get to confrontation. And because there are times when leaders do have to say, because this is what we said, but you can build consensus on where you want to go. And to do that, um, lots of conversation, lots of difficult conversations, possibly at times. But again, being able to use all the tools in your arsenal to be able to help the folks understand that status quo is just not acceptable anymore. It's interesting, and I apologize for going on a tangent, but 2/3 of the jobs that students will go into now in present day um, require an above high school education of some kind, whether and it could be a variety of different things, whether it be training or onto a college or a higher education of some kind. And so I think that the schools that we used to have are no longer those schools. My father grew up in a small town and was a farmer, went into the family business, worked hard, but he had a high school education, did what he did, and did very well. My brother, who is then of course next generation, also wanted to go into the family business, did so, but he also had to go and get a college degree, because even though they both had gone into the same family business, it had changed over 20, 30 years. And so I think what we have to do in education is take a realistic look at what it is that we are preparing our folks for. And our kids, it's interesting, I have two kids. I have a 17-year-old and I have a 9-year-old. And the world that my 17-year-old will go into will be different than my 9-year-old. And so what we want to do, and I know as a parent, what I want for them is to be happy and to be healthy and to be prosperous at what it is that they are able to do. But we have to give them the tools to be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about the PLC process is that it's really focused on what do the kids need to learn, how do we know if they did learn it, and how do we know, and then what are we going to do if they do and don't get it. And what I love about that is that we're not confined to standards at you know we recently have adopted the Common Core, and that was a big change for all the states, and that doesn't really affect the PLC
Yeah.
process. It really just becomes, okay, these are the standards that we're told our kids need to learn, so we're going to focus on those. One of the great ironies that you mentioned was that teachers want to be the experts to their students, but don't want to be the experts to their peers. Why do you think that is, and what are some suggestions for helping them overcome that idea that it's bad to be the expert among their peers?
I I think it goes back to a cultural piece again. I think for so long um, we all learned the same, even though we really didn't. But we all learned the same, and I think that idea of mass production, it's just different now. And I would say that first of all, be confident in what you do, and if um, you know what it is you want to do, make sure that it is in line with what is best for students, and then hold true to that. Be willing to make mistakes. Be willing to put yourself out there. What we want to be able to do in a professional learning community is to create that environment where we are working interdependently of one another. And that collaborative culture is really much different than just being congenial with one another, just liking each other. We all like each other. But it's a matter of being able to say, this is what I am very, very good at. How can I help this student in really, and then we as adults in a collective group help the student or students reach that goal. So we recognize the uniqueness of what we can bring to the table. And I think also knowing that we're not going to be perfect at everything, and understanding that we can learn from those around us just like they can learn from us. And so it truly is a collective effort. It's an interdependent effort to reach that common goal, because just like we've talked about, That focus in on learning is great, but I will tell you, we can't meet every need of every child on every day, not one person. I was a relatively good first year teacher. I taught fifth grade in Topeka, Kansas, and I was relatively good at what I did. But I know that I didn't meet every need of every child on every day. And so, what we have to be able to do is collectively do that so that we can work interdependently and meet those standards that you were talking about. And not be afraid to say these standards are most important. It doesn't mean that you don't teach the other ones, but you don't necessarily have to intervene on absolutely everything, because again, you won't have the ability to do that. So that knowing your strengths and areas of concern and be able to bring those to the table is what I would tell probably teachers out there.
Well, and that idea that you can um, only you can give yourself permission to only intervene on the things that are absolutely essential, I think is very freeing for teachers, because then they can say, you know what, this kid doesn't get this one concept, and I'm okay with that because I'm saying that's not essential. But when this concept over here that I am saying is essential, they don't get it, I'm going to do anything and everything to make sure that they do get that. You talked a little bit about what stories we tell, and for a moment, I'm just going to brag a little bit because it was pretty cool. Our school went and visited all the kids before school started, and so you were, thank you. You were talking about what is in our newspaper, and just yesterday, our school was on the front of the newspaper for doing that, which was really cool. And what was so neat about that was that that is us um, really having a story to tell. In the summer, we had 18 teachers and staff who volunteered their time to go out and make sure every kid felt like they were cared for. When that's our culture, it becomes possible for us to do a lot of things that we couldn't have done when the kids didn't know that we cared about them, or when the perception was that we didn't. But it's hard to argue when we've said it so many times and we've actually gone out and done it, that that's not what we're doing. So that was really exciting, and was really cool to hear you talk about what's in the newspaper is what matters.
Well, and it's, the old adage is people will sometimes believe what you say, but they will always believe what you do. And that's a perfect example of being able to make that connection, because, as we travel around and as we talk with schools and really have this work embedded into the culture of your school, you do start to see that how important it is to be able to connect to the community and to be able to connect to those kids. And now they'll know who you are before school starts. When they walk in your school on Monday, they're going to already have a leg up, and so are your teachers. And that is, I think, the part of PLCs that teachers, especially when you're just learning about PLCs, I think that's one of the things that we forget is this work is beneficial to us as well. And I know one of our participants this morning made a comment that, but you grow being collaborative. You will grow, professionally grow, a tremendous amount. And it's really, I think personally, it's almost impossible not to grow when you work together collaboratively. So I think that I applaud your teachers, because that is, and you for going out, because now you have really not cemented the relationship, but you've definitely put a step forward. It even goes beyond the sending postcards home. That's wonderful. That is wonderful.
Thank you. We were really excited about it. I actually learned from it. I learned about the idea and got coached by Principal Rob Carroll out in Kentucky, who's just doing amazing things all the time. And he has a hashtag that he uses on Instagram that's TGIM. Thank God it's Monday. And
Awesome.
it's he's just excited to be at school and excited to be working with those kids. And it's really great to see that among other people.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the cultural piece as well too. Is you want to create an environment where kids want to be. We want to create an environment where adults want to be, and so I think that that's a wonderful piece. You mentioned, and I apologize, I just was thinking one of the things that you said, what advice would I give to people as well with culture, and just like I talked about this morning, we know that there are going to be some things that we need to start doing in schools, and I have no illusions about that. I think that we try to start doing things, but I also think that part of having those conversations, not just with ourselves but with our colleagues, is to be able to say, what do we need to stop doing? I gave the example today of I was sending emails to our principals all the time, and I realized that I had asked them to be in classrooms, and what I was doing was I was sending them emails asking them to do things at the same time I was saying go to be in the classroom. So what I had to do was I had to stop sending those emails during the day. I think that we have to be able to do that with ourselves, and that is so difficult. Teachers are so caring and so diligent and so attending to the task that we have a tendency to want to do it all. And what we have to be able to do with our essential outcomes and with working interdependently is say, we know it's going to be done, it doesn't have to be done by us. And so if we need to stop doing that is counterproductive to the culture we're trying to create, which of course is culture of student learning, if it's counterproductive to something that I need to do or get done for my students, then we need to go ahead and have permission to be able to stop that. And I know that the focus here in Kodiak is to be able to do that.
Absolutely. I was just going to reiterate that there have been many things that we've done for years or that we've started doing that we say, this isn't really working out, so we need to it's not really best for kids, it's not really helping kids learn, so let's cut it out. And thankfully we're in a district where the district administration really does support that, and it is amazing that that happens because um, one of the one of the teachers that I work with didn't do so well in their evaluation last year and said, I don't want to do a plan of improvement because I don't want to do just another pointless meeting. And my response was, neither do I. I don't want to do that
Exactly.
either. Let's not do anything that is a waste of either one of our times. And if we can commit to doing those kinds of things, then the words that we came up with, the supportive, professional, honest, trust, respect, unified, that define how adults treat each other in our schools, that was an activity we did. If we can do those things, we can definitely support those key terms. Um, so if if we're in a situation where we're starting down the PLC path and we need to get going, um, we've already got school initiatives, we've already got things that we're doing, we've already got plans. One of the things that we're going to need to do is have a PLC meeting,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
What does that PLC meeting look like? And the talk about the frequency and when we how we schedule and prioritize that.
I would say that if you can focus in on the four questions, the four critical questions, and I'd rather look at it as a collaborative opportunity rather than just quote unquote a meeting. But being able to focus in on those four critical questions. Number one, what do you want your kids to be able to know and do? Because those are your essential outcomes. And you really can't answer the other questions until you've answered that. And I have a colleague, Kim Bailey, who said, think big, start small. And I loved it. So I'm going to continue that and say, think big, start small. And if that means teachers take a look at the first unit of instruction that they're going to do, what do we want our kids to know about that unit? From that unit, at the end of our unit, what do we want our kids to be able to know and do? And then building our assessments around those essential outcomes. And so that really answers your question number two, which is how do we know that they're going to have learned it? We want to make sure that we're using the right assessment, we're using the data correctly. And then of course you can answer questions 3 and 4, which is number 3, which is how are we going to respond then when those kids don't know it? Because no matter you can have the most perfect lesson, you might have the opportunity to have kids who didn't know it for a variety of reasons, who didn't learn it. And then really question number 4, which is what are you going to do if you've got kids who have already mastered it, because we all know just putting another packet of work in front of them is not the way to go. And so, just like my colleague Kim has said, start or think big, start small. And so, I would say that that would probably be one of the things that would be most effective, because we can handle a unit of instruction. When we look at a whole year and looking at essential outcomes for that whole year, that's a little overwhelming. And it would be very, very easy to get our PLC opportunities to be derailed. The other thing that I would say is I am pretty much a purist when it comes to PLC, and albeit I know that it would be very easy to look at our time and say, oh gosh, I would like to go, I have that time on Friday, let's go ahead and. Let's not do that. You know, that time should be as precious to you as anything else, and so we have to make sure that we keep that as pure as possible. And so, albeit I know that we would love to be able to discuss the last fire drill we just had, bottom line is we've got to keep our focus focused. And it really, Mike Matos, one of our colleagues and a guru with regards to response intervention, talks about what is the business of our business? Why are we here? And so if we can answer that honestly, we're here for student learning. So if we can keep the business of our business within our PLCs focused in on that student learning, and those 4 critical questions allow us to be able to do that, kind of give us something to hold on to, we can go ahead and make that time beneficial really to everyone, but of course especially to students.
Cool story about Mike Matos. We are doing a different schedule where we have tutorials, which, as I'm sure you know, he does at his school, and we made a video for parents and teachers to describe that, and we mentioned him and Austin Buffum, who helped us go down that path.
Yes.
And Mike actually sent a message on Twitter to my assistant principal and said, why don't you call me and we'll chat? And he gave us 30 minutes of his time, and it was amazing. And it was really cool to know that we're going down the right path and have that support. So
Shout out to you and to Mike.
definitely a shout out to Mike. He's definitely awesome. So the question that I know teachers are asking, because they're asking me it, is what about our grades? How do we deal with grading things and doing this? We're in a standards-based system here, so we've got that going for us, which I think is a good thing. But then, do we need to grade every single assignment? Do we need to grade only the essential standards? What about all the other stuff they're supposed to learn? How do we reconcile that?
Well, and I think that the answer to that, albeit I could provide a one pat answer to that. I think what's more powerful is the conversation that your faculty and your teachers will have behind what really grades mean, and what is mastery. Is mastery a 4 out of 5 on a rubric? Is mastery, so those things are going to be the power to that is going to be really from your staff. They have that magic, that conversation that they can have. No, for definitely you do not. Please don't grade everything, because I think that you would really hyper each other into a frenzy probably if you did that. I think that and research will tell us, when you have formative assessment, if you can marry formative and summative assessments both within your wheelhouse, so to speak, you can be able to take a look, and a lot of researchers will say that formative is not necessarily graded, because it's you're looking at it, the little steps along the way. It's really assessment for learning. You're using the assessment to be able to say, can I do this, can I not, and then the why piece of it that's so important. Marzano, in his book, The Highly Engaged Classroom, talks about 4 different pillars, and I know Tim Brown, a colleague of ours, does a lot of work on this, is the last pillar that is so very important is really that self-efficacy, that I can research. And Marzano talks about the fact that you can have the double-digit gain for students if you're able to bring those students in to the process of being able to identify what it is I know, what it is I don't, and why don't I know it. Did I make a silly mistake on addition, or did I not carry correctly, or it could be a variety of different things, but bringing them into the learning process so they can take ownership. I think that causes the learning to just increase, increase and increase and continue to increase. But I don't I don't want to get tied up in the one right answer. What I would much rather do is the magic that your staff can create in that conversation. And then as long as everyone is well trained and understands the goals, then I think that again that goes back to culture. And you'll have that united culture to be able to say, and here's another thing about culture, is when you have that culture of focusing and on learning, absolutely everything you do will change. Everything changes when you work as a PLC and have that focus. And here's the thing, eventually all the kids will be looking at that saying, everywhere I turn, someone is saying to me, you can do it and I'm going to help. And even for those who may not quite be as enthusiastic learners as others, finally they'll say, well, I might as well do it because everybody's going to keep bugging me until I do anyway. So that's really what you want, and that's the beauty of seeing everybody achieve at high levels.
Yeah, that's definitely powerful. We're a pretty small school. We've got one teacher for each subject area for each grade level.
You bet.
Not a lot of opportunities for teaming at the
Right.
same grade level.
Right.
What we've done this year is set up grade level prep periods so that teachers can plan together with their team to really focus on the students and to focus less on their individual content, but to have that support for our kids so that they're the ones who are coming first and we're focusing on their learning as a team.
Sure.
How do we, what's your advice on grade level PLCs versus content area PLCs, and where's the difference and different importance there?
Well, and I think that I think that in a middle school, I think that they're both important. I think that being able to vertically align as well as horizontally align, I think that's very important. I think that when you work as a subject level, you may not have others who teach that subject level, so being able to do it virtually, and I know that is something that you have done, and I know the outlying schools have done that as well. It isn't the same as being able to meet face to face, but it can be just as rich and have just as rich conversation. I encourage you not just to meet those who are in your district, but to be able to see if we can virtually connect throughout the state or really throughout the country. There is no reason that we couldn't. And I know through allthingsplc.info, which is a website that Solution Tree has, that you can buy nothing on there. There's no commerce, but you can find other school districts that look like you to be able to collaborate with. So I know that is a very rich opportunity to have your science and your math be able to talk with other science and math teachers who would be talking the same language, so to speak. And then also I do think it's beneficial to have all of your 7th grade teachers or all of your 8th grade teachers or 6th or whatever to be able to discuss, because then you can truly talk about possible patterns with kids, things to look out for, an area if a child is having something outside of our purview, because we do have a sphere of influence. But if something is going on that we need to know about, obviously, then we can all share that, and just be able to be that, the best intervention is prevention. And we want to make sure that we can do just that, is prevent any kind of failure, because failure is not an option. And I know it's a trite saying, but you talk about grades, and since you're standards based, you're well on your way. But and I said it earlier, I would love to have a school that has an A, B, C, and not yet. Because if you're truly having a school district that is, failure isn't an option in learning for all, then why would you allow C's and D's? Or excuse me, D's and F's? And so that's, I think, your standards based is well on its way. So kudos to that too.
Thank you so much for your time today. I
You
have
bet.
one last question that I
Sure.
ask everybody is what is one thing someone can do this week to become a transformative principal? Where do we start?
Oh my gosh. Wow. I would say help your teachers to understand uh, the value of what it is they do by talking with them and getting clear on their focus. Getting clear, Becky DeFore talks about clarity preceding competence. And so we need to get clear on what we're doing and why we're here. And especially as we begin a school year, we're beginning schools, this is the time. There's nothing like the beginning of school. And getting clear on why you're here, and not even setting goals, not even setting all of those things, but getting clear on why it is that you walk in the door every day. I think that that's probably one of the most important things that principals can do.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. My name is Jethro Jones, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you do me a favor and click on the show notes for this episode, I've got a quick little one question survey. What is the biggest thing that is most challenging to you right now? If you could take a minute and answer that question, that will help me find guests that are more applicable to the things that you need to have happen in your school. And I'm happy to find ways to help you be a transformative principal. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. You can follow the show at Transformative Principal.